In this video, we're going to be looking at the Hamilton Khaki Field Automatic. The sad truth of this watch for me is that I wanted to have something mechanical with Swiss made on the dial that would be cheap enough where if I was mugged for it, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Something I'd be completely comfortable wearing in the town I live in. With those criteria in mind, a Hamilton Field Automatic makes perfect sense. It ticks all the boxes, and it isn't aesthetically flashy either, so it's even less likely to draw any attention. From a collecting standpoint, the watch itself ticks quite a few boxes for me. At the time, it was my first field watch and my first experience with Hamilton as a brand. Field watches were originally designed for military use, starting in the Second Boer War and becoming even more prevalent in World War I and beyond. The whole point of a field watch is immediate legibility, granted from high contrast between the dial, numerals and handset. When you're trying to time your movements to avoid your own artillery fire or form a synchronized assault, those split seconds really count. For a modern use, a field watch is still the fastest way to tell the time in my opinion. It might be a few fractions of a second, but those add up, and sometimes they really matter. As a brand, Hamilton has an interesting history. Originally formed in 1892 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. In their early years, the main focus of the brand was producing pocket watches, with one of their biggest customer bases being railroad workers. After World War I and the increase in demand that it caused, Hamilton switched their focus to wristwatches. Perhaps their biggest claim to fame is the Ventura, part of the Electric 500 collection. It was the first electrically powered watch in the world, and it was famously worn by Elvis and attracted an entirely new customer base to the brand. In the late 60s, Hamilton began to move its operations to Switzerland after buying out the Buren Watch Company. This gave it access to Swiss made on the dial, and within a few years Hamilton had ceased its US production entirely. In 1970, they released the other model they are perhaps most famous for, the Pulsar, the world's first digital display watch. Within a few years of the Pulsar's release, Hamilton was bought out itself by what would go on to become the Swatch Group, where it remains today. Looking at the watch itself, a big appeal of the Khaki Field Automatic is the sizing. Now it's available in 42 and 38mm and was previously available in 44mm too. The model you're seeing here is a 38, as 42 is far too big for me. It also comes in at 11.5mm thick, so for me it's well proportioned in both aspects. If you're interested in the wider field range from Hamilton, be very careful with the sizing, as most models come in at least 2 sizes and some go all the way up to 50mm. Some models have very long lugs. I think this is because they're designed for NATO straps. It means for me they look a little ungainly on bracelets. The range itself is extensive. There are models in bronze and titanium, ungainly looking chronographs, bulkier King and Expedition models, the basic mechanical range, and then perhaps the pick of the bunch, if you can afford it, the Murph. Made famous by the film Interstellar, this strays quite heavily from being a field watch, but has classic timeless looks, and the superluminova colouring and cathedral hands give it a very vintage feel. It carries on Hamilton's famous tradition of featuring their watches in film. On a side note, when I first reserved the name of Impulsive Watches, I initially had the idea of using it as a double entendre and featuring both films and watch reviews. My professional background is in film and media at this point in my life, so I'd like to think I have an interesting take or two. I still might try that out at some point, but it's very easy to get pigeonholed into a single style of content on YouTube, even on a tiny channel like this, but we'll see. Certainly, Interstellar would make for a great film to discuss. Not only has it spawned an excellent watch, but an incredible soundtrack too. Actually, getting one of these turned out to be quite the saga. It started with a hunt for a new one, looking through various sellers online. It has a recommended retail price of £640, but you can find them a lot cheaper, so it's definitely worth shopping around and trying out a few codes. After some unsuccessful hunting, I turned my attention to the second-hand market, as I so often do. Here you'll be paying anything from £300 to £400 for a decent second-hand model. It just so happened that one of my searches coincided with a new listing, only 3 minutes old. A nearly new watch at £230 on a buy it now. I bought it immediately, and sure enough, a few hours later got a very strange message from the seller telling me that the watch didn't actually exist. Often on eBay, if the price is too good to be true, that's because it isn't. This is also a watch that taught me a few things about watch collecting and politics. Let's start with the political side of things. Living in England, Brexit has meant that we now need to pay import tax when buying from a lot more countries than we used to. So when hunting for watches, you either need to take that into account or shop specifically in the UK. This watch led me to understand that what eBay considers to be the UK and what is actually the UK are not the same thing. After getting a refund on my first attempt, I found another watch a few weeks later, this time at £265, and from the look of the photographs, in really good condition. Again, I made the purchase, but was then stung with a hefty import tax bill. I didn't really understand how that could be the case and queried it with eBay. Turns out they count Jersey as part of the UK, even though it isn't. So it's worth paying close attention to exactly where you are buying from. Even after the import tax, it still fell well within the £300 to £400 range and the condition was perfect. So I just took it on the chin and learned to pay much closer attention to location on future purchases. You live and learn. The other big lesson this watch taught me about watch collecting is that I suck at picking alternative straps. There's nothing inherently wrong with the provided strap, but I'm not a fan of the horizontal stitching, so I looked online to find a replacement. I thought black to match the dial, with red stitching to match the highlight on the second hand. That would really set things off. However, I've become conditioned to shopping for bargains, and the strap I bought was cheap, but poorly made, and not particularly close to how it's supposed to look online. I now firmly believe that, number one, I definitely don't know better when it comes to watch design than the brands do. And number two, if I am going to shop for straps, Google Images has far better solutions than I'd ever find on my own. On a negative side, my biggest gripe with the watch is that crown. It's far too large and feels completely out of proportion with the rest of the watch. It does make sense though. The whole point of a field watch is to be rough, ready, legible, reliable. A large crown means it's less fiddly to adjust the time. I dare say you could make changes with it even wearing all but the thickest of gloves. This is definitely a case of function over form though. It's a bit of an eyesore compared to the rest of the sleek design. While this is a field watch, aesthetically it has a number of design flourishes that elevate it above the basics. The polished and brushed stainless steel case, prominent branding, sectioned dial, bespoke leather strap, and exhibition caseback are all proof of this. It's elevated above the simplicity of other field watches, even those you'll find in Hamilton's own back catalogue. The beauty isn't just skin deep either. That exhibition caseback gives us a view of the H10 automatic calibre, which, just like its Swatch Group stablemate, the Tissot Powermatic, sports an 80-hour power reserve, though it is worth noting the movements aren't exactly the same. The specs are also supported by Superluminova, meaning that this is a good to go anywhere, do anything kind of watch. Not only that, but if you think back to my initial justification for buying the watch, it also isn't obviously ostentatious and doesn't attract any unwanted attention. So what do you think of the Khaki Field Automatic? Is it something you consider for your collection? I've been under the weather recently and it's the busiest time of year at work, so I apologise for the current infrequency of my videos. I really appreciate the support on the channel recently, in particular for the videos I've made on vintage pieces that are never going to get as many views as modern ones. Please feel free to like and subscribe for more content like this.